Prime. Okay, so we're actually today continuing a subject that we did last year, near Parshas Ki Sisa, on Parshas Ki Sisa. So this is a sequel for what we learned last year and left it in the middle, and today we're going to finish that. Sound good? So the topic that we chose is, may the real Tzaddik please stand up. And we're going to explore tonight, in continuation of a talk of the Rebbe, which we discussed last year on Parshas Ki Sisa. We will review it, of course. I don't expect everybody to remember it. But last year we went into the Chet HaEgel. What was it spiritually? What did it really represent? Was it Avodah Zarah? And the conclusion of that entire investigation of what occurred there brought us into a discussion regarding the need of a Rebbe, of a Tzaddik, of a Moshe, which Klal Yisrael were trying to remake with the Egel. So really our focus tonight is going to be on the idea of the Rebbe, and we're going to review some ideas that are already quite prolific, Baruch Hashem, of the teachings of Chassidus on the objectivity, the purpose of a Rebbe, of a Tzaddik per the eyeglasses of the Chassidic movement. And we'll also get into a discussion of something that I actually touched upon in the Sunday share regarding how many tzaddikim are there, how many Moshe Rabbeinus are there in the generation? Is there only one? Are there many? Does anyone have the monopoly on the Moshe Rabbeinu? And the different relations between Chassidim and the Rebbe, and Chassidim and other Rebbes, or other tzaddikim, so to say. And hopefully at the end of the class we'll gain a new appreciation for knowing to cherish our tzaddikim, but at the same time know to cherish also tzaddikim of other groups of Jewry. So let's begin. The story of the Egel, right? The most famous story, the most famous sin that the Jewish people did. The first sin after Matan Torah, and the most severe sin recorded, possibly in our history as a Jewish nation. Second to the Chet Eitzadas. Many of the things that occurred to the world after Chet Eitzadas and were cured with Matan Torah returned to the world after Chet HaEgel. And what all the Mefarshim ask, like the Ezer, the Ramban, the Kli Yakar, the Chaim, all the Mefarshei Torah, all jump at the story of this week's Parshas Ki Sisa, of where the Torah paints to us a very severe picture of individuals, the Jewish people. Aaron, the leader, basically collaborating to perform idolatry, the most severe sin in Judaism. Only 40 days after the giving of the Torah and entering into the bond with Hashem. Being unfaithful just 40 days in. And the Mefarshim all ask, how can this be? It makes no sense. This is what we did last year. How can it be that number one, Aaron HaKohen, the Tzaddik, the person who was destined to become the Kohen Gadol, could be part of such a terrible sin of idolatry, collaborate? He actually created the Egel. The Pasuk calls it his Egel. It was his Egel. And at the same time that he takes part in it, he doesn't get punished, nothing happens to him, Moshe doesn't kill him like he had to do to the other 3,000 individuals. And he becomes the Kohen Gadol, even though someone who serves idolatry is possible to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And here, the father of idolatry, so to say, from what the verses from what Scripture describes, becomes the high priest. So it doesn't make sense, the Mefarshim ask. It also doesn't make sense, how could Klal Yisrael stumble on such a thing so close to Matan Torah? And what the Mefarshim answer, the Ramban, the Ibn Ezer, and pretty much all the Mefarshim in one wording or another are leading to this point, that the true intent of the Egel was not at all Avodah Zarah. The Egel was an Avodah Zarah. It's a misnomer. The Pasuk, although when you read it, it can sound like they were serving idolatry, right? When the verse says, "This is the God of Israel, Elu, Elokei Yisrael," the Egyptians, it sounds like they're saying, "This is idolatry. This is the new idol. This took you out of Egypt. Go serve him." In truth, and the Parshas explained that this was not a story of idolatry. Yes, there were individuals, 3,000 total, who were killed because they actually turned into idolatry, but 3,000 was less than 0.5% of the entire Jewish people. It was a very small number. It was a fringe group. But the vast majority, 99% of Klal Yisrael, never believed it to be idolatry to begin with. And their intent was for something totally different. What was their intent? Their intent is the following. So the Parshas to explain. They were at Har Sinai, and they heard the voice of God speaking to them from the mountain. And what did they do? They immediately it says they ran away, they ran back. They were Srachik Yud Beis Mil. They were distant 12 mil from the fright of hearing God's voice. And Moshe was trying to persuade them to come back. And they said, "We'll come back only in condition we hear from you. We can't hear from God anymore." And Moshe was very upset. What is this? You have an ability to hear from God. You want to hear from the messenger? And he went back to Hashem and he told him, and Hashem agreed. He said, "No, it's enough. They heard the first two dibros. They got the message. We'll take over." And so he agreed with what Klal Yisrael requested. And Moshe became the spokesman, so to say, of God, starting from that time. Now, Moshe was not just the spokesman, but Moshe Rabbeinu basically served as the medium for them to be able to connect with Hashem. And after their miscalculation of the 40 days, and Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to return, they felt, due to their miscalculation, that Moshe seemingly went up to Shemayim and is really enjoying it up there, and he decided to not come back. If any of us went to Gan Eden, I don't think we would come back. We would want to. Right? Famous story of Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. Says all the other tzaddikim, when they died, before they died, they promised that they wouldn't allow Gan Eden to bribe them away from working for Klal Yisrael to bring the rule. They would sit and demand and work as a real good lawyer for Klal Yisrael. So Levi Yitzchak Barditchev saying. And he's not going to be fooled. It says the Rebbe that when Levi Yitzchak Barditchev was taken up after 120, after he passed away, and Hashem gave him a sniff of Gan Eden, it was over. He was it. So Moshe Rabbeinu, as much as he's a great person, but Gan Eden is Gan Eden. He must be really enjoying it up there. He doesn't want to come back down. And if so, we need a new Moshe. We need to find a new leader. Now, no one that we know of is fit to be like Moshe. Everyone agrees no one is capable of taking place in the shoes of Moshe. So therefore, the only thing we can choose is something immobile, something that is inanimate, gold, metal, and turn it into a magic using, right? They used Kabbalah, they used the Shemus of Hashem to turn it into a raging bull. And this bull is not chas v'shalom, something we're going to serve, we're going to worship, God forbid, heaven forbid. No one had any intent of such a thing, and no one could be so stupid. They heard God on Har Sinai. They knew this didn't take them out of Egypt. They weren't, if anyone did think that this now newly created bull took them out of Egypt, then they're insane, and they're cut from all to same God that took you out of Egypt now resides on this figure. They wanted to make him a mutzah. They wanted to make a replica of Moshe Rabbeinu, just like serve medium, the spokesman, to relay God's messages and to help the Jewish people connect to God. So too, this ego was meant to take that place of Moshe, because no human can do it in their eyes, and have the Shekhinah reside with it, and be the source for where their direction and leadership would come from. I didn't see in the Mefarshim whether it talked, but what it does say, correct. It says it ate and it moved, but what it does say is that the Mefarshim say, at least the Ramban or the Ibn Ezra, maybe both, that they intended on having it. One of the major things they wanted for is to help lead them to Eretz Yisrael and conquer Eretz Yisrael. So whether that would be through talking or through just walking, I have no idea. But the bottom line is expression. There was definitely a form of expression that they were expecting from this figure, which is abiding Hashem's presence, for the sake of taking over Moshe's leadership position. So this was their purpose in building the Egel. It was not at all a design. Similar to, we discussed this last year, if you remember. So this is similar to something that, in fact, the Jewish people did after that time in the Holy of Holies with the Kruvim, and it was a mitzvah. There was no more Moshe Rabbeinu, or even when there was Moshe Rabbeinu, right? They had a mitzvah with the Mishkan to build the Aron, build the Kaperes, and build the Kruvim on top. And it says that the Shekhinah would be bin Badi Ha'aron, would be between the poles of the Aron, and would come out, the voice of God, from between the Kruvim. Now think about it. We already are used to the ideas in the Torah, so we don't really take offense to this. But if you step back and think about it, having the figure of an angelic body inside the Holy of Holies, it sounds like idolatry. It sounds like an idol. But this is a figure that God commanded and instructed us to make. It had very holy correspondence.
Which is not the case with the Egel.
It's not the case with the Egel, but I'm just saying, similarly, we see the idea of creating a figure for the sake of having the Shekhinah dwell within it or on it, for the sake of Klal Yisrael, is not something insane. It's not something crazy. It's not something without precedent. It has precedent and was done in the Beis Hamikdash. In the Mishkan, it was done. So the only problem was that this particular case was not instructed by God. No one's allowed to go ahead and make themselves Kruvim right now for the sake of having the Shekhinah. It's only within the temple, within those godly given instructions. So because they didn't have that, it was viewed as a sin. But nonetheless, the idea was not an idea of idolatry. So what then was their Avera, if that's the case?
I remember this class.
Oh, now you remember? What was then their Avera? So we explained in a few ways. We said, number one, we do agree that some individual Jews did have this lead to idolatry. They literally bowed down and served it as idolatry. So when the pasuk describes actual idolatry, it's referring to those very minute individuals, the fringe group, the Erev Rav, as it says. So even though 99% of Klal was not part or believe in the idolatry, they were accomplices, because they shouldn't have made the Egel. And the fact they made something that led to a sin of idolatry was viewed very severely. That's one understanding. Another understanding is that they were punished for having lack of Amun and Moshe. It says, "V'aminu b'Hashem and Moshe Avnei." There's a mitzvah to believe in the Chachamim. Moshe Rabbeinu told them, "He'll be back. Why are you doubting if he's going to come back?" He said, "He'll be back. At least give him a few weeks. Give him some time. What are you, it's like the next second. The second he doesn't show up, there's only about a 6-hour difference. You know, the moment he doesn't show up, you already go crazy and you build an Egel and do such a massive revolution. Relax." Moshe Rabbeinu said he'll be there. He'll be there. Have stronger amunah. So these are different approaches of what exactly their sin was. And this is basically what we concluded with in the class. So we're going to discuss now a little deeper what exactly Klal Yisrael wanted out of this Egel. What did they receive until then from Moshe that they felt would be lacking that Egel could take over? And with that, what is the chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov in the idea of a Rebbe or of a Tzaddik? So it's no secret that the Chassidic movement had a number of revolutions in thinking about different points of Judaism. And one of the major ones is regarding the status of a tzaddik. What is a tzaddik? What is his function? What does he do? The tzaddik outside of Chassidic thought was a very different tzaddik than a tzaddik within Chassidic thought. Before Hasidism, a tzaddik can be viewed, someone, number one, at the basics, he's a great Torah scholar. And number two, he follows everything of the books of Shulchan Aruch. He does everything God wants. That's a tzaddik. And what's a Jewish leader? So many people are tzaddik. I remember once, a Litvish roommate of mine was honestly convinced that his grandfather was a rebel of a tzaddik, because his grandfather never missed a meeting in his whole life. And so it's a great thing. You know. But a tzaddik has what's called a Shem HaMushal and a Shem HaTorah. It has an essential meaning and it has a borrowed meaning. So to use the borrowed term tzaddik, such a person, 100%. Koach tzaddik, and it's an amazing thing. But to be a tzaddik or pi halacha, in terms of a pi Shem HaTorah, the essential name, so what the Baal Shem Tov taught us is that it's something much, much different. Just showing up to minyan every single day, as great as that is, does not make a person reach that level of a tzaddik that we're referring to. So the Baal Shem Tov taught us that, number one, a tzaddik is something much higher and much greater than what we borrow the term for. And with that, he also taught us a difference between a change of perspective regarding what a Jewish leader is. Until then, a Jewish leader was viewed as someone who, of course, a great Torah scholar, very pious Jew, and therefore he contains what's called Das Torah. That exact term, I don't know who coined it, Das Torah, but we do find it in some poskim. The Rogatchover used to use the term daiti naita. He didn't use the term das Torah. He used the term my mind tells me. I think over the last 80 years in the Litvish world, they grabbed this concept and they turned it into a principle of das Torah. I'm not aware historically of the term being used previously. In any event, but the idea is always applied. So this individual is a Talmud Chacham. Let's take the Gra, for example. How do they view the Gra? A tremendous Torah scholar of the highest caliber, in Nigla, in Kabbalah. And so what's his position? What does that mean that he's a leader of Klal Yisrael? So leader of Klal Yisrael is somebody who can give direction. He directs people. He directs Klal Yisrael of what decisions to make, which political party to vote for, what they should be focusing on and learning, if they should learn Kabbalah, shouldn't learn Kabbalah, different decisions that come up, what they should do if Chas Shama, a government decree comes up. And of course, giving direction to halachic queries that come up, with the generations, different halachic questions that daily so the Pesach Adar, they're the ones who arbitrate and decide this. So that is a very true, but also very dry understanding of what a Jewish leader is. What a tzaddik, who is in the position of a leader, is function is. It's a very external function. As to the common individual, there may not be any real need or connection to this God of Yisrael, as if he doesn't have any halachic questions that are relevant to this person's arbitrations. It just doesn't occur to him personally. and there's no major xeris that the person has to, that's relevant to him. So what's his connection to this Jewish leader? Nothing. He's a Jewish leader for certain people, but for this individual, there's no connection. The Baal Shem Tov came along and he changed the approach and the view of both the tzaddik and the leader, the tzaddik as with the definition of what it is, and a tzaddik in the position of a leader. Number one, as we know, that a tzaddik, as explained in Chassidus, explained in Tanya, and brought a lot in Teres Baal Shem Tov and Kesser Shem Tov, even more so in Naim Elimelech. There it's on the highest of levels, the definition of a tzaddik. The tzaddik is, there's no, Naim Elimelech is a book for tzaddikim. He wrote a book for people like him, tzaddikim like him. A tzaddik is someone with no yetzer hara. Forget about that he goes to shul every morning. The guy doesn't have a yetzer hara. He doesn't have an evil inclination. His entire life is dveikus to Hashem, love of God, passion for God, hates evil, tachas sinas anesim, and all sides of evil. Someone who's a merkava for the Eibush, someone who's a chariot for God, has no feeling or desire of sin, and on the contrary, has a passionate hate and dislike for anything sinful against God's will. Eradicated the evil inclination, as the Alter explains, tzaddik gama, tzaddik sheina gama, different levels, different quantities, but nonetheless, the idea is the same by all of them. That's the common denominator. There are no yetzer haras, there are no evil inclinations. So, you know the famous story of Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim was a tremendous Torah giant and Torah leader, and he worked hand in hand with the Rebbe Rashab and Rebbe Rayatz in different functions in Russia, battling different government decrees, etc. They worked together hand in hand. So they were friends, they were acquaintances. One time, one of the students of the Ravdin Yeshiva heard that the Rebbe, heard of the Rebbe Rayatz, that the Rebbe Rayatz had referred to the Chofetz Chaim as a Beinoni. He took it very offensively. He wasn't well versed in Tanya, this student. He took it very offensively. How dare the Rebbe Rayatz call Chofetz Chaim a Beinoni? So he asked us to one of, there was a Shadav, Rebbe Rayatz, that came to the yeshiva. And he approached him and he asked him straight up, how can your Rebbe say such a thing about the Chofetz Chaim? I thought they were very close. I didn't understand there was tension. I didn't know there was tension between them. So he said, let me ask you a question. Do you think the Chofetz Chaim maybe one time, even one time, had entertained a bad thought, maybe one time entertained a bad thought about speaking Lashon Hara about someone, and then he did tshuva and wrote his whole sefer. Maybe one time, you ever think that maybe one time he had a bad thought? And he said, oh, come on, you're nitpicking. Of course, everyone has bad thoughts, but he's still a tzaddik. He said, well, guess what? Our Rebbe testified that Chofetz Chaim did not have even one bad thought. It's a Beinoni, a pitanya, someone who controls his machshava dibur ma'aseh. It doesn't allow expression of any evil at all, ever. So what this student of the Chofetz Chaim, how he viewed the Chofetz Chaim, he himself didn't understand who the Chofetz Chaim was, and the Rebbe Rayatz did. This is because of mistaken identity of what a tzaddik is. So the Baal Shem Tov first and foremost told us that a tzaddik is something totally above the caliber of just someone who keeps Torah and mitzvahs, learns a lot of Torah, goes to shul every day, never missed a minyan. You can call him a tzaddik as a borrowed term, no problem. The pasuk says, "Amcha kulam tzaddik." Of course, it's a nice thing to call everyone tzaddikim as a borrowed term, but as an essential term, of the essential meaning, then it's a very select and a very high criteria level. So that's the first thing that the Baal Shem Tov taught us. The second thing the Baal Shem Tov taught us is regarding the function of the tzaddik as a Jewish leader. Until then, There was no such thing as someone being the pusher to a tzaddik. No such thing. The Jewish leaders, I'm talking about the Gedolei Yisrael, they stood segregated amongst their group of scholarly students. Only the most scholarly students were allowed in their circles. And their whole purpose was to educate their scholarly students to themselves become great Jewish leaders and scholars. And give, as we said, directives, sakim, whenever necessary, whenever the Gedolei Yisrael need to pass them. But the plain Jew, the 99% of the rest of Klal Yisrael, who were working men, non-Torah scholars, non-Yoshvei Ohel, they had absolutely no connection with these leaders, with these individuals. And not only did they not have a connection because they technically were just not around them, they were not allowed in the yeshivas, they weren't accepted into the study program, but furthermore, it was viewed that there has to be this segregation between Torah scholar and layman. But the layman, he's on a much lower and different level than the Torah scholar, and therefore there has to be complete separations of powers between the two. This was the widespread attitude in the times of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov continued what was already started with, you can say, then in the Star movement of the old Baal Shem, which was years earlier. The Baal Shem Tov really spread these ideas of where the tzaddikim connect, these real tzaddikim, as we explained before, according to the Hasidic definition, connect to the plain folk and connect to all Jews possible. And the purpose of that was twofold. Number one, the purpose of it was simply to be shluchim, to arouse them in Avodas Hashem, to help them out as no one else was doing them. No one else was taking care of them. But number two, the purpose was to fulfill a necessary ingredient for every single Jew's connection to God that is missing if he's not attached to a tzaddik. And this is the second major teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. And this second teaching is what got the Baal Shem Tov and his students, Magid, the Alter Rebbe, and all the Chavaya Kadisha into the most tremendous trouble with the Misnagdim. Baal Shem Tov taught that a tzaddik is someone who helps attach the Jew to God. We call him a mutzeh and a chaber. When we attach to the tzaddik, that's how we attach to Hashem. You can imagine that if until that time in Judaism nobody had ever heard of such ideas, they can start thinking that this sounds heretical. This sounds like some other groups that have went off jury, the breakaway minions, the various different forms of Jewish breakaway minions, Christianity, Frank, Sabbateans, etc. So they became worried. They became nervous. And in fact, in some of the documentations that they put in against the Chassidim to the Russian government, which we now have available to read, in translation, these were their main claims. One of their main claims was how we're turning the tzaddikim, or the leaders, into, well, the way they wrote it was like God, that we're turning them into gods. That's the way they wrote it. As they had tremendous trouble with this idea of saying that a tzaddik is someone who connects the Jew to God, that he's, so to say, holding the Shekhinah, and when we connect to the tzaddik, we connect to Hashem. But nonetheless, this idea of the Baal Shem Tov, that the tzaddik helps connect the Jew's neshama to Hashem, is sourced in Scripture, and is sourced in the Talmud, and many, many other sources. I'm going to go through that now. We have mentioned this before. The Gemara in Brachos writes, the pasuk mentioned in Devarim states, "U'ledavka," by commanding the Jewish people attached to God. "U'ledavka," by you shall attach to God. That pasuk is listed as one of the 613 commands to attach to God. So it's attached. Now, how do you attach to Him? Where is he? How do I grab him and attach him? So maybe you can answer, do a mitzvah. When you do a mitzvah, you attach to God. The problem is, doing a mitzvah is its own mitzvah, counted as one of the 613. So you can't say that another one of the 613 is to do mitzvahs, because every mitzvah is one of the 613. So when I put on tefillin, I'm fulfilling the dafka. When I light Shabbos, I can't fulfill the dafka. There's already a command for it. It has to be something unique and individual. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara asks, it starts off in the following question. To attach to him, it asks, how on earth can someone attach to God? Regarding Hashem, it says, he's a consuming fire. He's a flame. How can you attach to fire? It's impossible. And the Gemara answers, it doesn't say you attach to Hashem through Torah. It doesn't say you attach to Hashem through mitzvah. It could have answered. It was a great answer. It could have said that by fulfilling mitzvahs and learning Torah, that's how you can attach to Hashem without getting consumed by the fire. And as we know in truth, when we do fulfill Torah mitzvahs, we have vekas to the Eibush. No arguing on that. But the answer the Gemara gives is the following. This is a mitzvah to attach to the Talmidei Chacham. And when you attach to the Torah scholars, I consider it that you have attached to me, to the Shekhinah. This is an explicit statement in the Talmud. Bypassing Torah, bypassing mitzvahs, and saying that to attach to the Shekhinah is specific to attaching to the Talmidei Chacham. We've discussed this in other regards in different lectures. Now, what's the reason why? That's a very cryptic Gemara. It doesn't make sense personally when you look at it from the outside. It makes no sense. What on earth does attaching to a Talmud Chacham? First of all, what does it even mean to attach a Talmud Chacham? So the Gemara lists a few different things. And marrying your daughter, it lists different things. It doesn't even mention learning from him. It doesn't even say to become his student. It doesn't say that. It mentions having different things involved. So we once discussed this from the Sefer Chinuch, who writes that this is a mitzvah to love Talmidei Chacham. The mitzvah is to love them, to feel an emotional connection. In addition, of course, it means to listen to their teachings and their Torahs. But the Hadash, the emphasis of the Gemara is the idea of having a relationship with the Talmud Chacham. Now the question remains, why? Why does the Torah command the Jew? I understand that the Torah told us, rabbis are very important. They have a lot of knowledge that they can share with you and help you and guide you. So go listen to their speech. That's like go to the doctor because they have more medical knowledge than you, and they can give you, the prescription. Go to any expert in any field if you need something in that field, and they can help you. They could have told us, go to a Talmud Chacham in order so he can direct you in halacha, in hashkafa, whatever you need. But it's not what this mitzvah is. This mitzvah is not a mitzvah of direction in hashkafa. This is a mitzvah of attached to Hashem. And in order to attach to Hashem, this is the avenue you have to go through the Talmud Chacham. And it doesn't make sense. Why? So all the Baal Shem Tov was doing was explaining the Gemara. What does the Gemara mean? Why is it that we need the Talmud Chacham to attach to Hashem? Baal Shem Tov explained that the Talmud Chacham is a very high-level tzaddik. In reference in this Gemara, it's not referring to any Talmud Chacham, it's referring to tzaddikim. And these tzaddikim are a chariot for God, a cover for Hashem. The Shekhinah resides with them. And when we attach to the Talmud Chacham, we attach with the Shekhinah. Very simple. Now we can understand, going back to the Chet HaEgel, what was going on there. The Jewish people didn't just learn about this, what we just said. That you need a tzaddik, and the tzaddik helps you attach to God. They lived it, they experienced it, they felt it. They didn't just receive 8 dibros from Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. Moshe gave them 8 commands, now they don't have anyone to teach them commands. Moshe Rabbeinu gave a great shir in Gemara, and now they don't have anyone to give them the shir in Gemara. So they're missing the shir Gemara. This wasn't an external dry relationship of where Moshe was just a teacher, limited to the position of a teacher, and therefore you can then go try to find another teacher in his place. But Moshe fed Klal Yisrael their dveikus to Hashem. Moshe fed them. They were in a state of tremendous passion and yearning and longing for God after Kriyas Yamsuf. And Moshe Rabbeinu was feeding them the connection to God that would quench that tremendous thirst for Hashem. When Moshe Einenu, Moshe is no longer, right? They did the calculation. Moshe is not coming down. Everyone panicked. They have here a tremendous thirst for God, a connection to Hashem that they're wanting on, that they're waiting on. And the person who provided that felt connection to God is no longer here. So they felt, not just intellectually, it wasn't just an intellectual decision to make the Egel. It was an emotional decision. They felt they needed to make an Egel Azov for the sake of serving as a new conduit for the Shekhinah that through it they can attach to Hashem. Very similar to the crew.
What did they do for 30 days?
It's a good question. Maybe Moshe gave them some leftovers. Maybe he provided them enough food for 40 days. It's a good question. But it also could be, even though it doesn't say regarding this, it could be that Moshe, even upstairs in Shemayim, was giving them this connection. It didn't have to be physically down on this earth for this connection to happen, for this tzveikus. And just like it says in the Medrash that the Satan created a vision of where Moshe passed away, so maybe they felt a loss of this tzveikus. I haven't seen such a thing written yet, but hypothetically, giving over the possibility that they felt the loss of this tzveikus through the tzaddik, through Moshe. But if this is true, then it would explain the irrational, quick rush to a decision to right away build an Egel and right away make a new mamutza, because it wasn't just a matter of wait how many shuls there are that wait for the new rabbi to come. They can go months, sometimes years without the rabbi. And sometimes they say it's better that way, but nonetheless, they can go a long time without the rabbi. No one's in a big rush to make a decision the next day. They don't need a decision the next day. They take the time to do the votes. They bring a few people from different places. Everything's very relaxed. But this was not just a decision who's going to be the new Rosh Hashiva, who's going to give the new Shir Club. This was a matter of to touch the very essence of their souls, the connection to God that they so very much wanted and yearned and longed for. So this led to the sin. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya in Perik Beis, as we know, everything in Chabad Chassidus takes the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and turns it and brings it down to Chachma Bina V'das, to an intellectual comprehension. So he takes this idea, which all Chassidim believe in, the fundamentals I just expressed regarding the Baal Shem Tov's teaching of what a tzaddik is, and it's very different level than how it was viewed until then, and how a leader, a rebbe, a tzaddik connects to people to Hashem. This is Chassidus Klali. All Chassidic groups believe this. One of the fundamental principles of the Baal Shem Tov from every Chassidic group around. And so what the Alter Rebbe did is that the Alter Rebbe brought these ideas down more to understanding, the comprehension of why that's the case. What are the details of what's happening between the Jew that he's not connected and he needs the tzaddik to connect? What is the lacking in the Jew without the tzaddik, and what is the tzaddik here accomplishing? So this, the Alter Rebbe explains in Perik Beis in Tanya. Some people ask, Tanya is considered Torah Shebechsav of Torah Chassidus, the written Torah of Torah Chassidus. One of the main principles of Torah Chassidus, the idea of a Rebbe. Where is it in Tanya? A number of people ask this question. Where is it in Tanya? How come it's missing from Tanya? The answer is not missing at all. You may have missed the boat of where he mentions it, but it's not missing. It's in the second chapter. Rebbe, even though he's bringing it, so to say, as a derech agav to explain something else, but in truth, he's already laying not only the principles of what a tzaddik is, al pi teres of Baal Shem Tov, but also al pi teres Chabad. let's see. We're not going to read the whole Perek Beis, but we'll just read the end where he brings us down. So in chapter 2 in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, after stating in chapter 1 that every Jew has two souls, not just one soul, he has a godly soul and an animal soul, and then he explains the animal soul in chapter 1. In chapter 2, he begins explaining the godly soul, that is, number one, what it is. It's a portion from God above, and how it comes into the body, that it's blown in, the nefachtabi. And he goes through the rest of the chapter pretty much explaining the great descent that this soul goes through. Its initial state of how it's absolutely connected with God, as the nafach is talking of an action that comes from the deep depths of the person. So metaphorically to God, that means that the soul of a Jew, the godly soul, is coming from his deepest parts, which is going on Chachma Vatzilus, so it comes from Chachma Vatzilus. Now that the Alter Rebbe built in beginning in chapter 2, how high and holy and sublime the godly soul of a Jew is, he then goes on to explain what happens when it actually goes down to enter into a Jew's body, and the changes it goes through in that process. And he explains that as the neshama, the nefesh elikis from Chachma Vatzilus, travels down in Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, it goes through a lot of changes and concealments. While in Atzilus it was complete and absolute godliness, when it reaches Bria, it already becomes what's called a Yesh, the Kus Nasa Nivra, becomes an independent entity. And then as it goes deeper through the worlds, it goes through different changes and concealments. And that's how we have various levels of godly souls. That's how we have various levels of godly souls in each generation. And that's how we have various levels of godly souls in comparison of generations. Previous generations, these generations, etc. Some souls are Bria souls, which they have tremendous intellectual capability, comprehension of godliness. Other souls are Yetzirah souls, where they're more emotional. And other souls are Asiya souls, where they don't feel, they don't think, they just do. Have tremendous Bittul and Kabbalah soul. That's what we are. We're in the bottom of Asiya souls. If anyone knows anyone differently, that's okay. But usually, most people today are at the bottom of Asiya souls. Within Asiya, we're the bottom. We're the last of the last. So what then is so then we're stuck with a question. If so, you just started saying in Tanya chapter 2 that the godly soul of a Jew is so holy, so sublime, part of God above, Chachma Vatzilus, and now you just went on to explain how no, that was only originally, that was history. That's a history lesson, but now it's went through a great descent and change and metamorphosized. It's no longer the same. So how are you saying it's still Chachma Vatzilus, a part of God above, connected to God the whole time? Explains the Alter Rebbe the Father. We're reading now inside. In kol zeh idena kshuris umiyuchades beyichud niflo va'atzon u'mohusan v'atzmos narish. Even though this soul, which currently went through the descent and changes until it enters a person's body in this world, is in its current state very distant from its state of Chachma Vatzilus, nonetheless, it still remains unified with it in a tremendous and powerful connection in its essence, just like it was originally. How? As the nurture, the channel of life, godliness, of these low souls, which are all the souls that came down to this world, their channel of life comes from the nefesh, ruach, and neshama shel tzaddikim v'chachamim asher b'nei Yisrael sheb'dei. They receive it from the tzaddikim and the chachamim, the heads of Israel, as he explained earlier, that the heads of Israel, the tzaddikim and chachamim, their souls never changed. They retain the original sublime state of chelik elokami ma'al mamish of chachma batzilus without any taint or change. So we, the people, receive from them. We are connected to them. They retain Chachma Vatzilus, and that's how we remain bound to Chachma Vatzilus. This is the intellectual explanation behind the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Tzaddik connects us to Hashem and behind the Gemara, which says that the fulfillment of the mitzvah of attaching to God will dafka by is through attaching to Talmidei Chachamim. In other words, that there's a certain relationship and dveikus that's achieved through fulfilling mitzvahs. And there's a certain relationship and dveikus achieved through learning Torah. However, in order to attach your soul, your nefesh elikis, back to God as it was originally, that's done through the Talmud Chacham. When you do a mitzvah, you bring elikus to your body. When you learn Torah, you bring elikus to your Chabad. When you attach to the Tzaddik, you're bringing elikus to the essence of your soul. So it's not a circumventing way out of Torah and mitzvahs. It's a different quality of connection that can only be achieved through connection to the Tzaddik. So this is how the Alter Rebbe laid out the philosophy of the Tzaddik according to Chabad Chassidism. And in truth, the Alter Rebbe here also laid out the premises for the specific viewpoint of Chabad Chassidism in the function of a Rebbe. As even though all the Chassidic groups agree to the concept of the Memutza Mechabed, he connects us with Hashem, there is a well-known difference in viewpoint between Chabad and other Chassidic groups regarding how strong is that function. According to other Chassidic groups, the Tzaddik, he does the job and the work of the connection for the Chassid. So although the main avodah Chassid is to be connected to the Tzaddik, and he's good to go. He's on the bandwagon of the Rebbe. However, by Chabad Chassidism, it was always viewed that while the Tzaddik helps to motivate and electrify the mood and stimulate the Chassid, but the Chassid has to then run on his own. So Alter Rebbe also lays this out. He hints to this already in this chapter, and saying that the idea isn't that we have very low souls. We've lost Chachma Batzila, so to say. We've lost that attachment, that oneness with God. The Tzaddik has not attached to him, and by doing that, since he's attached to God and you're attached to the Tzaddik, so then you're attached to God. No. By you being attached to the Tzaddik, says the Alter Rebbe, your own soul is considered attached to God, without the middle. In other words, that the purpose of the Tzaddik is to help re-energize and to help rejuvenate and to reform the low soul, that it return to being in the state of Chachma Batzilus, it itself, without needing to leech onto a middle soul, to the Tzaddik soul. In other words, the function of the Tzaddik is that every single Jew should eventually become Tzaddik. Sikh of the Rebbe says this once, that even though not everyone can be a tzaddik, literally, in today's times, but he says that in Mashiach's time, every Jew will have the ability to be literally a tzaddik of pitan. As when you become a tzaddik pitan, you return to Chachma Batzilus, every Jew will then have that connection, and that connection was brought about through the tzaddik you were connected to. That's what helped rehabilitate the low neshama. There's another aspect that's explained, and this is explained in the Maimorim of Parshas Tetzaveh last week, of the function of the tzaddik of the Rebbe. So far we said, in general, that he attaches us to Hashem, and in particular, that he attaches your low neshama to our low neshama to the high neshama, which is his neshama, and through that we're attached to God, either through him or that it helps to rejuvenate our own attachment, that our own soul should be rehabilitated. There's also mentioned other things, other functions that the tzaddik has. In other words, in addition to the 2 points we've already mentioned of the difference between a tzaddik and the Baal Shem Tov's philosophy and prior to his time, the difference between what his function was versus how it was viewed prior to his time. There's another aspect which also is novel and wasn't understood back then before the Baal Shem Tov came, of the subconscious and sublime effect that the tzaddik has on the people of his generation. Till then, was believed, as I said before, if you don't have a connection with the tzaddik, if you don't have a connection with the Rosh Hashiva, with the Gadol, then you're really not receiving anything from him. You have no relationship. You agree that he's the Gadol. You agree he's the president, but there's no relationship between the two. Hashem Tov said that through attaching to the tzaddik, you attach to Hashem. So that's why it's necessary to attach. Even simple people have to attach to the tzaddik. And now comes a third step in which there's a subconscious flow of attachment between the tzaddikim and the individual Jews that occur subconsciously, whether we are aware or not aware, whether we like and enjoy or don't, whether we want it or don't want it. I'm going to read a few words from Alter Ibn Torah in Parshas Ki Sisa-May. He writes like this: Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom. This is in reference to Moshe. Koiche Gadol. He had tremendous power. Shemamshich u'mashpia b'chinas das b'knesses Yisrael. As he would draw down the level of das, knowledge of godliness, into the Jewish souls. In other words, that our ability, a Jew's ability to be able to comprehend godliness, and then from that create a feeling of love for God, that is coming from Moshe Rabbeinu fueling us with that ability. Moshe Rabbeinu draws that energy, that power into our souls. Even those souls who on their own do not have great intellectual capabilities of godliness. They can be very smart. They can have very high IQs and be a buck in Chassidus, but they don't have the ability to translate that knowledge into real raw feeling of passion. This is called Zera Behema, like an animal souls. Why? Because animals, they don't understand anything. They don't. Doesn't click with them. Try to explain to them. I just try to explain to a dog basic math. Basic math. Right? Animals, they don't have comprehension skills, no intellectual skills. So Zera Behema, even those souls that are, as they say, as dumb as a rock, in terms of either intellectually or emotionally, for God, for spiritual purposes, Moshe feeds them this hargasha, this feeling of elikos. So sometimes, when the person has a sudden asirus of tshuva, a sudden feeling of passion, it can come from various sources, but one of those sources is from the tzaddik feeding that to this person's neshama. As Moshe Rabbeinu was not just someone who taught us Torah and mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu was called the faithful shepherd. He is listed amongst the 7 shepherds, and he is the most unique of these 7 shepherds. Why? As he feeds and fuels the souls of the Jewish people through sending into their minds das of elikus, knowledge and comprehension of godliness. And this is the literal meaning of Raya Mehemna. One way of translating it is the faithful shepherd. He's faithful to the Jewish people. Another way, Shemefarnes es Amuna. Raya, he shepherds the faith. He feeds us the faith. He feeds us the godliness into us. Okay, this is the end of what we need to know. So far we built up that the tzaddik is not just someone who is a big Talmud Chacham, learns Torah and keeps the mitzvahs properly, but someone who is on a completely different caliber, doesn't have a Yetzer Hara, Dveikus to Hashem, is a chariot for God, etc. Number 2, the tzaddik is in charge of helping connect the Jewish people to God. And as the Alter Rebbe explains, that the low neshamas, which is everyone else in the generation, are connected to their original state, a Chacham or Atzilus, through the tzaddik. And number 3, the tzaddik feeds these spiritual necessities towards our souls, so we have ability of serving God properly. Now here comes a question. How many tzaddikim are there who fulfill this function? Is there only one tzaddik who fulfills this function? So actually, let me just clear that out. The Lamed Vav Tzaddikim, they are. We don't have time to go into this properly, but there is a concept called shepherds, like Rayim Mehemna or the Shiva Rayim, which we're discussing right now, and then there's called Shmeina Nesichim. There's two types of tzaddikim. They both don't have Yetzaharas. They both are very holy and spiritual and scholars and chariots, etc. But one takes the second function of being a shepherd for the Jewish people, a leader, attaches the neshamas to God, feeds them, and the other does not. The other is called Nesichei Adam, and those are the 36 tzaddikim. The reason why they're hidden is because their function is more in the upper worlds. They're like dealing with the computer stuff. They're the people in the army that are in the computer rooms working everything, but they're not the generals. They're not the commanders. They're not the ones that actually are. But they're doing a lot of behind the scenes to help. So the 36 tzaddikim, they are real tzaddikim, and they're always around. Even today, there's 36 tzaddikim without doubt, as the Gemara says. But their function is not for this. They are not leaders of the Jewish people. They are more the spheres workers down here, working the spheres. Okay, so how many revealed leaders are there that fulfill this level of the tzaddik, that they, as we said, feed our neshamas, das and elikus, connect our neshamas to Hashem? It's a simple question. Is there only one per generation, or are there many? No one has an answer? Shana? Is there one, or are there many? So you're saying there's only one. So the truth is, your answer is the answer that everyone says. If you ask Lubavitcher, how many leaders are there of the generation? If you ask a Breslaver, how many leaders of the generation are there? If you ask a Litvisher, how many leaders of the generation are there? One. Everyone's agreeing there's one. Go to the Gers, go to the Vizhnitzers, go to the Belzers, go to the Sfardim, the different sects of Sfardim. Baruch Hashem, it's unbelievable. We are all on the same page. There hasn't been such achdus in Klal Yisrael. This is unprecedented. We all agree there's only one leader. The problem is everyone's pointing to someone else.
But we're right.
And that's what they say. Everyone's pointing to someone else, and everyone is convinced they're right. And they are. They're convinced that they're right. Even more so today than other times. This idea of the tzaddik that the Baal Shem Tov brought, and he's not just a Rosh Hashiva that he teaches you. He's mamish, your connector to God. Mamish, your hashpah, your channel to God, is today mainstream. This is mainstream now. This is not limited to the Chassidic groups. Litvishers now believe it with their Gedolim. Sfardim believe it with it. This has become another one of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings that has, gone through the wall of opposition and become mainstream thought in Judaism today. So the question is everyone wrong? Is everyone right? How does this work? So let's go back to Tanya. The words we read, if you paid careful attention, in Perek Beis, when the Alter Rebbe was describing that the function of the tzaddikim, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, Jewish leaders, tzaddikim in leadership positions, is to attach the soul of the Jew to God. We attach it to Chachma v'Tzivus. Notice the wording. He writes the following. It's from the nefesh ruach and neshama. It's from the soul, spirit, and neshama soul. Shall not ha tzaddik or ha chacham. Rosh b'nei Yisrael shebedar. He doesn't use the singular. He says tzaddikim, plural, chachamim, plural, Rashi, plural, b'nei Yisrael shebedar. He clearly says that there's more than one. He clearly states that there are a number of individuals in each generation. He's not talking now in comparison to all the generations, that altogether there's more than one leader if you amount all the generations of. But in each generation, in each dar of Klal Yisrael, the tzaddikim of Chachamim of that generation, they are the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, and they attach the souls of the Jewish people. So how do we understand this? How do we put together the thought or belief that our Rebbe is the leader of the generation, and all the neshamas of the generation attached to Hashem through him? Or let's say the Alter Rebbe's times. Let's go back to the future, back to the past, okay? We're in the Alter Rebbe's times. We believe the Alter Rebbe is the Nasi Adam, right? We believe each one of the Chabad Rebbeim is the Nasi of their generation. Was the Alter Rebbe in his time the channel through which every member of the Jewish people received their chayas and attachment to Chachma Batzilus? The Alter Rebbe himself writes in Tanya, plural, Tzaddikim, Chacham, and Rosh B'nai Yisrael. Does anyone ever heard an explanation on this?
Sometimes went to the rabbis and they said to go just not to go
You're taught with our Rebbe such stories? I'm not aware of such stories with our Rebbe, but definitely yes, definitely with the Alter Rebbe there are such stories. Yes, and the Mitzvah Rebbe there are such stories. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it is true. That is true. So we're gonna go into this a little more. Definitely, what is correct, okay, is as follows. Before I say what is correct, I want to read one more source, and that is from Torah, the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe in Torah says, which is of course Torah Shabbat Peh Chassidus, says the following. Chol Rashi Yeshivas Shebechol Dar, all the Rashi Yeshivas in each generation, and all the Jewish leaders, spiritual leaders in every generation, Hain, they in plural, are Bechinas Moshe. They are the level of Moshe. He's talking about here in the Maimer of first the effect of Moshe on the Jewish people, and then he was talking about how the Gemara calls different Amiron Moshe. Like, for example, Rava said a very nice argument in the Talmud, and then one of the other Amiram said, Moshe Shaper comment, Moshe, that was a great remark. What do you mean Moshe? His name is Rava. His name isn't Moshe. It's not his name. So he explains that every single Jewish leader, spiritual leader, they contain the spark of Moshe, the aspect of Moshe within them. And then he concludes, as each one of them draw the fear and love into those neshamas, into those souls. Once again, here the Alter Rebbe is emphasizing that this is a plural job. This is a job that it's not just the president. There are a number of people in the generation of tzaddikim, tamid chachamim, that are drawing down the chilu v'rechina. Now, possibly this can be even subconsciously, meaning we don't have to say that only really chassidim of the Baal Shem Tov are proactive about the idea of Ava and Yira. That's true. Everyone else is just focusing on Nigla mainly. Nonetheless, there could be someone who is a tremendous Talmud Chacham, a Gadol Adar and Nigla, who carries the power of Torah. He has the power of Torah in him. And being connected to him can give Jews the Chilu V'Rechina. Even if he himself is not Isaac, he himself doesn't necessarily deal with those sugyas, deal with those subjects. But one thing is clear is that there are the leaders of the Jewish people, they all feed the real tzaddikim and Talmidei Chachamim, they feed their generation, the Chilu V'Rechim, and as we said before in Tanya, the connection of the souls to Hashem. So I have not seen an answer for this question in the Mefarshei Tanya, which we have a lot of Mefarshei Tanya. There's so many books on Tanya out. I went through a number of them. I haven't seen anyone address this at all. And So I want to build some kind of a answer here, which of course we're going to base it on a number of different sources, which we're going to read soon, and that's as follows. Number one, Chassidus, and in truth, according to the Jewish philosophy and Hasidic philosophy, no one negates that there are many, many tzaddikim who have also the function, not just Lamed Vav tzaddikim, the tzaddikim amongst themselves, but leadership tzaddikim that have the function of connecting their flock souls to God, and it's not only one. Somebody believes that their Rebbe should be the Rebbe of all Klal Yisrael, and all the other Rebbes should go get another job. They get fired. What are they doing? They're playing games. My Rebbe is the real Rebbe. All the other Rebbes are a bunch of jokers, and they're impersonators. They're trying to impersonate. They should get a different job. We can give them, a job in the yeshiva or something, but there's only one Rebbe, and that should be the Rebbe of everybody, and no other Rebbe is allowed. It's not true. Not true. There are many tzaddikim, there are many Talmidei Chachamim, and they each have the God-given function of connecting their flock to Hashem. And we have never heard of such an approach in Judaism, and we never heard of such an approach from any of our Rebbeim, or anyone that others Rebbeim.
There's like channels and ones their own.
So there you go. So you're proving my point, right? So like you're backing up. Right. So we're gonna. I'm not familiar with the Torahs of Rabbi Nachman regarding that, but I am going to bring the different sources for the same idea. But the point is that no one is saying that no one should believe that they have the monopoly of Rebbehood, that their Hasidic group has the monopoly of Rebbehood. In other words, that it shouldn't be believed to the point where we chasam negate others. At the same time, it is healthy and a custom for Chassidim to believe that their Rebbe is the greatest of the leaders, or that their Rebbe is the leader, the main leader of the generation. Just like in Moshe, we have Sheva Rayim. There were 7 shepherds. Moshe didn't do all those jobs. It wasn't one shepherd doing 7 jobs. Of course, Aaron, Avram wasn't Shemayim doing it, sure. Moshe and Aaron were definitely simultaneously, but these are jobs that are done by their souls, of course. All the time. The 7 shepherds, till today, they're doing their job. Moshe Rabbeinu was doing all the jobs. He was doing one job, Raya Mehemna. His job was a movie. And as the Alter Rebbe points out, that was the main job. That was the most important job, that he was the president. But there's other ministers who are in charge of giving different hashpahs to the souls of the generation. And so too, just because we believe that, and in our instance, I believe that our Rebbe does on paper win it by far, the leadership position, whether it be in scholarship, or whether it be in terms of being Isaac with all Klal Yisrael, for many different reasons, tzidkos, miracles that we saw, Kodesh. So we have the right, we reserve the right to believe that our Rebbe, and I say this for every group, if it makes sense on paper, right? If it doesn't make sense on paper, then that's a problem. If it makes sense on paper, then it's healthy, and it was always a custom. Already in Talmudic times, they went ahead and they did a survey in the Gemara and Sanhedrin brings of many different yeshivas and asked them, who do you think is Mashiach? And lo and behold, everyone said their Rosh Yeshiva. Everyone said their Rosh Yeshiva is Mashiach. Come on. So we see here from the Gemara that there was a concept of holding your Rebbe, holding your Rosh Yeshiva, holding your leader as top of the town. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with being convinced of that. And as I said, with our Rebbe Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of good reason to believe that, and that's definitely what the Rebbe believed of the Rebbe Rayatz, and that's what we believe of the Rebbe. However, that doesn't negate and mean that all the other Rebbes are impersonators. No, they're fulfilling other positions within the administration of Rebbes, within the administration of leaders, of Klal Yisrael. So I think that is the simplest answer of coalescing what can seem like a contradiction. And this number one, it answers to those who say, no, there's no one leader of the generation. There's a whole bunch of tzaddik and everyone's evil. We know that there's one Moshe. We know there's one Melech. There's one David. Now, who he is, I believe it's my Rebbe. You believe it's your Rebbe. That's fine. You have the right, and I have the right. And if you really want to discuss, I'll do research on your Rebbe. You do research on my Rebbe. And if I see that I think your Rebbe is really better, I'll go to yours. But if you think my Rebbe is really better, you'll come to mine. That's fine. That's healthy. That's discussion, and everyone can choose their leader. But so that's on the one hand, it answers that no, there is one leader of the generation. On the other hand, it also takes to task the thought that other leaders or other are just puppets. Why? Especially if they're not bottled to my leader. So if another Jewish leader is not subservient to my leader, that means he's not only impersonating, but he's actually fighting the leader of the generation. So chas v'shalom, the person would come to a conclusion that anyone who's not on the bandwagon of his Rebbe should be put down, is someone who's fighting the Nasi Adar. Chas v'shalom, how you really see it. There's many different tzaddikim, there's many different chachamim, and they each attach to their flock, and one does not contradict the other. So we're going to read now from a few different sources to discuss these points. This is what I discussed in the Sunday share, based on what I was taught from Mashpil with Moshe Arnstein of Shavim. I was second to his last day of Shiva. No, the burial was Sunday, so Shabbos last day of Shiva. Yeah, Shabbos last day of Shiva. Okay, so one of the last days. In any event, so we discussed on the Sunday class regarding the terrible epidemic of people speaking against or putting down other Gedolei Yisrael. So I'm reading to you from a sefer which was written by a Lubavitcher Chassid in the 1800s. He was a Kapasta, a Chassid of the Shna Zalman of Kapast, the Magen Avram, who was the son, or the grandson, I believe, of Maril, Leib, son of the Tzemach Tzedek. He was a Chabad Chassid. They were called Chabadskers. Kapasters, they were Chabadskers. And he wrote a sefer called Beis Rebbe. Beis Rebbe is the first and most authentic Chabad history book ever published, at least prior to Sefer HaTorah in the recent generation. And he was very close to the Rebbe Marash, and this is what he writes. I'm reading to you his words in his introduction. In my introduction, he was giving over a few words of direction and mussar to the general Hasidic public, knowing that everyone would read this book. It was the first history book of the Alter Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek and the Mittler Rebbe. The first person this would be a bestseller. So he wrote in his introduction a few different words of friendly mussar. So he writes, another matter that I wanted to bring up is the great epidemic that has fallen amongst Chassidim themselves due to our great sins. To put down and make fun and belittle the tzaddikim of our times. He's talking in the early 1800s. So he's talking when this was written. Let's say this not early. This after Tzemach Tzedek. This time Merash Tzemach Tzedek. Asher Beis Yisrael Nishin Alein, onto which the Jewish people rely on. Their leaders. Beish B'chal Beis Kitas, and there are two groups of the tzaddikim mockers. Ha'alef, number one, sheyeir she'ata einem tzayim klal tzaddikim. One of them says there's no tzaddikim except my Rebbe. Other than my Rebbe, there are no tzaddikim. Like in the previous generations. One group of people think, at least Chassidim think, that today there's no tzaddikim around anymore. If there was, surely I would go and I would connect him, but there is no tzaddikim today. All the people of today are normal people just like you and me. Everyone's the same. Hakasa Beis, the second group, they do believe today there are tzaddikim. But who's that tzaddik? It's his tzaddik that he chose. It's his leader. It's his Rebbe. Who are tzaddik? The Shariat tzaddikim, they're imposters. They're nobodies. And he has the right to speak against them as he wishes. First, now to negate the philosophy, mistaken philosophy of the first group, which they say today, there's no, back then, of course, tzaddikim, but today, no one's a tzaddikim, no more tzaddikim. We find explicit in the Sefer HaKadosh name of Elimelech, in a letter to his son, in every single generation there are tzaddikim, but just that people don't believe in them. Writes like this, that in every generation there are tzaddikim, but certain tzaddikim, but in order to have it open and revealed for everyone to believe in them, their neshama have to be holy and have absolutely no dirt from sin. And when there is, so that prevents people from seeing them and believing them. But in every generation there are tzaddikim. We only believe in the previous generations who had the Chakodesh and Nevu and the miracles. So to in each generation they say the same thing. Meaning in the Baal Shem Tov's time they say that about the previous. Now the opponents of the Baal Shem Tov, they said, oh, he's an imposter. Of course, Ruach HaKodesh, Nevuah, miracles, that was in the previous generation, but now. So this is a cycle that's always been done. He says this is the Pirush of the Gemara that says G'dolim tzaddikim and misasim mechamin. Tzaddikim are greater in their death than they are in their lifetime. He's saying this as like a vart, that only after the tzaddik dies we actually finally say, oh, he was really a tzaddik. But when he's alive, we don't say it. Now, regarding the second group, I'm going to the next group. Regarding the second group that we wrote about, that they believe there's a tzaddik, but it's only theirs, and they make fun of everyone else. And this is certainly the work of Satan, in order to increase in machlekes amongst the Jewish people. There is nothing greater that causes machlekes when one person or one group slashes out at another group or at another tzaddik or another leader. It is the worst possible thing a person can do. It touches upon the greatest emotions, because everyone is very strongly connected to their Rebbe, to their tzaddik. When you speak out against it, it's one of the, first of all, it's one of the worst ways to win a battle, because you're just offending them. You're not going to win anything. And number two, it's wrong. It's a tremendous issue. Certainly, it's true that every generation has one tzaddik that's the main tzaddik of the generation. It's called the tzaddik ador, the nasi. And this is why we have different people going through different tzaddikim, as each one follows his shayrish hanasham. And each person thinks that the tzaddik he goes to, he is that one tzaddik that is the tzaddik ador. But even if you're convinced that this tzaddik of yours is the tzaddik of the generation, is that a reason, God forbid, to speak against other tzaddikim shabador in the generation? Asking us our rishonis. And Rashbel Shama recently they live in Muatim, Shnaimim, because they bador who have tzaddikim leroim. They were today makdoshim. The Gamata, and even today, Levar tzaddik am yuchash bador. Aside for the Nasi Ador, yesh oid tzaddikim harba. There are many other tzaddikim, kadoshim v'tayim, holy people and pure people, to which the Jewish people follow their life. The Chalila lanu in heaven forfend for us. The Dabar Sarah to speak against them. We are all obligated in their honor and respect. And to daven to Hashem to keep them healthy, that they should be healthy for many, many years. Every chassid should travel, and every person should travel to the group, to the tzaddik that he feels connected to, and no problem, he should drink from their waters. He should be connected with his tzaddik, with his Rebbe, with tremendous love. It's not our job to point fingers and put the tzaddikim through the different leaders through a filter and have only one left. Do these words sound surprising to anyone? Ever heard of this before? So this is the Chabad philosophy. This is the philosophy that should that should be taken, and this was the philosophy that was exemplified by the Rebbeim, by the Alter Rebbe, by the Tzemach Tzedek, by the Rebbe Rayatz, by the Rebbe. There was no such thing, chas v'shalom, of putting down. There's no such thing, chas v'shalom, of it's completely wrong. And it's if you ever hear somebody putting down other Jewish leaders, you have to protest them. You have to know it's not some people think that when you do it, you're showing that you're more connected, you're more makusha, you're a greater chassid because you're so strong about your Rebbe. It doesn't matter who's doing it. Is it a Babbacher, if it's a different chassid? People have to have respect for every single. And then again, we don't have to get into a fight, into an argument of, oh, he's not really the leader. Let everyone believe that their Rebbe is the leader. That's not a problem. But to put down, that's where already it's very. I want to read a letter from the Rebbe. There was a chassid that the Rebbe sent in 1959 as a shadar, as a messenger of his to Yerushalayim. It's unclear of what the circumstances was, but what it sounds from the letter is that he was sent to be mechazik. The Rebbe sent shluchim to different places, right? Sfas, right? In the 70s. So this was in 1959. Today? Really? So the Rebbe sent the Rebbe sent shluchim to different parts of the globe, and he would send often to Eretz Yisrael. Let's say after the murder in Bar Chabad, he sent a group of shluchim to help him mechazik. So it sounds like this is the circumstances. I don't know who this individual was. It's from English Kodesh, so it doesn't say the sender, doesn't say who the person. Especially as I'll read the letter, you'll see why no one wants their name written on this letter. So this individual was sent to, do some spiritual work in the Rebbe's name in Eretz Yisrael, and he was in Yerushalayim. Rebbe wrote to him. I was shocked to receive a letter from a certain individual. They crossed it out in privacy for reasons, so didn't write who wrote the letter. Regarding a certain Fabregan that you, the person who the Rebbe is writing a letter to, who was the shliach he sent, you Fabregan in a certain shul in front of a lot of people, and someone sent me a letter of complaint of the way you spoke at the Fabregan. Regarding the words you use, you use certain words, and you spoke negatively against Pliny, so and so and so and so. He starts off, I was shocked to hear this. That's Eis Gimel, Eis Dalet. It is certainly superfluous for me to lengthen on how important it is and how much Mesiras Nefesh Rabbi Seinu Nisiyenu had for Afatzas Hamayanas Chutza, for spreading the well springs to the outside of the cities. And the emphasis here was to the outside, to everybody. And from this it's understood, I'm translating, from this is understood how preposterous it is, behechlet completely, to do something that opposes and fights and wages a battle against the spreading of Chassidus. And certainly I don't have to emphasize that using the terms that it was written to me that you used regarding their Talmidei Chachamim in the place that you were, says, even if you didn't say such words, even if you said power of words or power of things, when you're saying something in public, you have to have tremendous responsibility and take tremendous thought of what it can be interpreted to. All the more so when you said very explicit negative words in front of many, many people who were there present, and who these people at the time were coming to get a taste of Chassidus and have no clue what Chassidus is and have never studied Chassidus, and we're trying to bring them close to Afatzas HaMayanis. By you doing this, you completely distance them. And the inyan of Afatzas HaMayanis is literally to save the Parshas Yisrael Pikuach Nefesh. And certainly that was the case in that Fabregan of the opportunity of doing Hafatzas Hamayanos, spreading the Hasidic teachings, the wellsprings of Hasidus to many, many people who were the first time they would see this. This was a matter of vada v'lo safek that in other words, the Rebbe is basically saying you had the ability here to save Jews, to bring them into Torah Chassidus, and the words you used caused them to become distanced from it. Hey, Yeshua is not over. Some of the words that you said during that Fabregan came as a result of the fact that you had too much mashka to drink. Translate. You drank too much yash, mashka. But even with this, I don't see a true necessity, meaning in drinking mashka. And on the contrary, according to many sikhs of the Rebbe Rayat, maguna hadavar, it is looked down upon someone who drinks mashka. If I can save myself from using a more sharp term. So the Rebbe ends that sentence. Number 6. I don't know if I should write you this. As possibly this occurrence was a one-time thing that will never happen again. But since I am not sure, and I suspect that this, God forbid, can happen again, I am letting you know now, I'm letting you know now in public and explicitly, that using the terms you used against those people, those Torah scholars, aside from being forbidden according to Torah, against any Jew, and certainly against a Talmud Chacham, who gam min hagedus la'avedus k'leidish l'b'senis, it also opposes the work of our Rebbeim. And if you taking mashke can lead to this happening, then you have to avoid taking it whenever there's a chashash. Number 7. It's understood that you have permission, and maybe even more than permission, to publicize everything I am telling you. Especially that now I've got mixed into this whole matter, as the letter of complaint was sent to me. They were claiming against me as if you were my shliach and I had you say this. They complained that I sent you on this shlichus to this country, this was in Yerushalayim, to say this. Then the Rebbe concludes here. It's understood also that there's no, I'm not angry or having a keda, but I'm just letting you know that I made a very great mistake. What the writing is. Ta'us ta'iti. As I told Pliny, as I said to the people who I sent him to, that you would be certain to everything according to my intent, as I understand as the intent, and in the ways that we created. But evidently, I've become greatly mistaken. Ta'isi tells Gemara, I was greatly mistaken, and see that you did not. And that's how the Rebbe ends the letter. So here we have, so if anyone says that this was just, I just read from the Hakdama of the, what's this?
All the letters that are compiled because what people gave them in.
Yeah, it depends. There were different, but I have to leave. Right. I have to leave, but not necessarily. There were a lot of letters that the Maskiros had. Some were, and some were from the Maskiros. Some were copies of the Maskiros. So both types. What this type was, I have no idea. But clearly, the Rebbe here is saying a few things. Number one, the idea of speaking against other Gedolei Yisrael or other Talmidei Chachamim is muktzamach masmius for Chabad Chassid, and it's not something that is nagel of with the Akdam of the Beis Rebbe. The Rebbe here made a big Indian of that. The Rebbe gave this guy. Imagine a chassid receiving such a letter. A real chassid, he probably stayed in his room for the next month. You want to go out of his bed. But this is a real thing where unfortunately, and especially if you're under the influence of mashka, a person can allow himself to speak, and if one of it's done. And as the Rebbe is saying that a person damaging hafatzas hamayanis is pikuach nefesh mamash, and therefore everybody has to respect all the other tzaddikim, talmidei chachamim, other groups. There's a lot more that I want to discuss on this, but we have run out of time, so we'll have to leave it here. And I think the lessons are self-evident and self-understood. And I don't suspect anyone here, Chas v'shalom, ever stepping on these issues, but I'm sure you've probably been around and heard. And therefore, we can be lamplighters to give the true Torah and Hasidic philosophy to others. And as I mentioned on Sunday, this was one of the things that my mashpia taught me, Rabbi Moshe Arnstein, and something that he very much bothered him. Okay, we are going to end.